Our next speaker is Professor Ashwini Sharan. Professor Sharan received his medical degree from the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey and did his neurosurgical training at the University of Connecticut and the Cleveland Clinic. He is currently the program director for the neurosurgery residency at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital and professor of neurosurgery at Jefferson Medical College and Thomas Jefferson University. His expertise includes deep brain stimulation, epilepsy surgery, and neuromodulation. He has received a number of awards for his work, including the William H. Sweet Award of the American Association of Neurological Surgeons. Professor Sharan was recently named President-elect of the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, and last month he received an award as a dual citizen of the United States and India for teaching, providing scholarships to students, and patient care, including operations on patients. Congratulations for all of that, and we look forward to your talk.
Now, thank you, Dr. Pedley, for that kind introduction. And I really want to start by echoing what Dr. McCann said and the sentiments to our host. This is really a tribute, Dr. Krishnamurthy and the Srinivasan family, to maintain such a wonderful tradition where we can have knowledge exchange and exchange of this. The vision is actually tremendous. And Dr. Gangadhar, thank you for a tremendous time at NIMHANS. Every time I come to India, it's really amazing to see what kind of work is being done. You know, in the United States, we have a little bit of an excess of resource, like we spoke about for a few minutes. And to watch what you and your team and everybody you've mentored done, it really makes us feel different and privileged in not a good way, you know, for what we do. But the opportunity to be here, you know, as an Indian-born and doing work on both countries, really, these opportunities for me are truly a very special delight. So the speech I'm going to give to you today is a little bit different from most medical talks. It's the address that I gave for my presidential address when I finished the term as the president of the Congress of Neurological Surgeons. And so the goal of that speech was to inspire everyone, inspire doctors, inspire patients, and really to lay a platform for the future. These are my disclosure. And the talk I titled at that time was called Mission Neurosurgery. And I was making a lot of analogies on how the exploration of the space was a chapter that everybody in this audience has probably lived through over the last 50 years. Some probably younger than others and may have missed some components of it, but we're seeing a reemergence of that with the Mars missions. But there was an era where we explored space, and now I submit is the era where we're exploring the mind. And hopefully that story becomes clear. And it is a story of technology and how that comes together. So I really believe that technology will continue to change the world, and it's going to help us deliver more superior patient outcomes. And in a place like India, the reason I started coming to India personally was I didn't believe that technology in the US would actually change the world because it was too expensive. And I really believe that technology has to be developed a little bit more here in India and actually grown and made in India before it actually changes the world, and I'll share some examples of that as well. So this is a story of space, neuroscience, and humanity. So I want to start off by this message, and it touched me because it was an address given by President Kennedy in Houston, where I gave my presidential address, and it's where mission control is. It's where NASA controls their spacecraft, space rockets from. And he delivered that on September 12th, which is incidentally is my daughter's birthday. So in that speech, he defined a single mission to the American audience. And what he said is, let's get safely to the moon and back. And he inspired the country to mobilize its talent and resources to achieve that single goal. And that message resonated with me because with such a message and so much resource, they were able to get an astronaut on the moon, Neil Armstrong, 7 years later to that date. So I'm just going to read you that speech because it is resonating. So Kennedy says we chose to go to the moon, among some other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And that in itself is a tremendous statement, because it's about not doing things because they're easy. It's about taking on challenges because they're hard. And it is what healthcare is, it is what neurosurgery is, it is what understanding science is. And he says because that goal will serve to organize the best of our energies and skills. And that's what they did. And I'm going to submit that the neuroscientists are the astronauts of the central nervous system. Now, I give this a little bit more for just a little fun. You know, India also recently, about 4 years ago, sent a satellite to Mars to also show its strength and rise in the world of technology. And like everything that is done, India did this for only $70 million. Sounds like a tremendous amount of money, but is nothing compared to what the US spent in the 60s on a space mission. And the fun part about it is, I don't know how many people have seen the movie Martian by Ridley Scott and Matt Damon. It took the US $108 million to make a movie about going to the Mars. And this country did it for much less than that. So while America's space program was building, you know, I was born in 1970, and my parents immigrated to the United States in 1971. They were both immigrant couples, and my mother was a geography professor from India. She did her master's at Patna University. And when she came to the US, my father had sort of this insight saying that it's not a good future to be a geography professor in this country. So he made her take courses at New York University, and she did a master's in computer science at that time. Now, they couldn't afford an a babysitter, so she used to take me to her classes with her. So I started computer programming when I was 3 years old. I got my first Commodore VIC-20 on that screen in 1980s. Now, that's before the internet was a thing. And that's what I thought I was going to do, but you know, like most immigrant families, they take a conservative route, and their dream was that I would become a doctor. So, you know, I feel like I have a very meaningful career at this point in life, and it's even more interesting that I get to implant the chips that you saw Dr. McCann talk about. I get to implant chips and wires in the brain and the spinal cord. So somehow things actually work out in life. So the space mission, getting back to the story, was a story of leadership. It was a story of actually having a structured pursuit with a defined task. And like all missions, you have to have great leaders, somebody who takes charge, somebody who's inspirational, somebody who understands risks and balances all the risks and fears that go with that, somebody who has to be first. And I've just given you a list of a lot of firsts in the space program, highlighting not only Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Jim Lovell, whose names are a little bit more known, but Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space in the Soviet program at that time. Now, in neurosurgery, we have our own mission as well. We have our own leaders. And I just mentioned them just to tell you what kind of risks they took on. They were operating in an era where about half the people, the reason there is such fear of surgery was always first in everything that it did. And these men were operating in a time with minimal lighting, taking out tumors in the brain with their finger, taking out tumors in the brain through the pituitary route, through the nose, sometimes opening people's head, looking for where the seizure is coming from, and 20% of the time closing it because they couldn't find a source. And half the people in that era didn't even survive. And that's because there weren't no medications. That science had not even formed back then. So that's kind of people these people were, really strong-minded individuals. So I'm going to take you on the journey of space and talk about 3 areas. Visualization, which in medicine I'm going to call diagnostics, robotics, which I'm going to call the interventions, and computation of the cognitive data integration part for those 3 areas. So you see, this concept of looking into space is not new. It's from the time of Galileo. We've seen it improve across 500 years since then. And just to show you the apex of that is the Hubble telescope, right? You can see hundreds of billions of light years into space and process that imaging now. Now, visualization is so important because visualization, I submit, is what allows us as people to nurture our curiosity, right? And seeing makes the unknown known. And with that, we can continue exploration. So I hope that that's obvious for a second, and we'll get to that inside the brain shortly. Now, the next big step in visualization, which actually, and from the space science, which actually is relevant for medicine, is the study on the Doppler effect. So in 1842, the Doppler effect was described, and it actually allows estimation using sound and waves to estimate how far celestial objects are. Now, in 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik satellite. And there was a lot of competition between the Soviet Union and the United States at that time, and two American physicists were monitoring the Sputnik satellite, and they realized that using the Doppler effect, they could pinpoint where that satellite was along the Earth's orbit. And they got access to the UNIVAC computer, and they were able to, from that technology, emerge today's modern GPS system, and we use that type of technology, and I'll talk about it shortly. Now, in the last 3 or 4 decades, visualization, seeing the unknown, has made tremendous bounds in medical science. And I'm going to point that out to you because these were worthy of Nobel Prizes. So in 1979, the Nobel Prize is awarded for CT scanning, and in 2003, the Nobel Prize is awarded for MRI imaging. So now we can actually see within a millimeter inside the mind, or inside the brain. Now, that I want to put into perspective how great of a point it is. There's a picture of a pneumoencephalogram from the era before the 70s, before the CAT scan came out. See, the brain is not opaque. It's not dense. It's a soft structure and does not show up on X-rays. So we really didn't have a tremendous understanding of the core anatomy. We knew this from postmortem and cadaver sections, but in the real-life person, when it comes to the detailed of blood flow and the nuances of anatomy and function, that is only a science that's developing in the last 20 years from a practicality perspective. So today, we are able to use all those technologies, and we'll all mix everything towards the end. We can take all those imaging sciences from CAT scans, from angiograms, to MRIs, and we can couple it with GPS technology. So in the operating room, when we are there as surgeons, we call these tools cranial and spinal navigation tools. We can get an exact estimate in 3D space where we are. So that's what the space technology development has allowed us to do in the operating room. And see what's happening next. So the picture on the left is endoscopy. The endoscopy technology is here in India, and it allows you, through the same endoscope technology, to put in the brain and see the deepest parts of the brain with incredible lighting. The image on the right is an electron microscopy, which can now also be brought into the operating room, and you can see blood flow in living tissue, real live, while you're operating, and that's what those two pictures are. And I suspect that we're going to be able to see tumor cells, we're going to see dysplastic epileptic neurons. It's all getting there, because once we know what we're looking for or going after, we're going to figure out how to treat it. And I think people have seen these things on TVs, augmented reality. It's actually already being used for self-driving cars, but you're going to see this idea of augmented reality also coming into tomorrow's surgical navigation tools. So the computer will use its artificial intelligence to help warn the surgeon of what kind of things are happening. And that's already being done for spinal surgery. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is robotics. And why is robotics important? Because robots can do the same job over and over again and do it exactly the same way. It's integral in manufacturing cars and other consumer goods, and it's all around us. Like it or not, maybe it's not all around us in healthcare, it is all around every factory. It allows you to have pencils, chairs, it allows you to have food, it allows you to have cars and TV, it allows you to have chips. So inherent in robots is this process engineering that brings efficiency and scale and cost reduction. Now robots are going through massive breakthroughs. So on the left is a video of what the Canada Space Arm can do on the International Space Station today. And that arm can snag a satellite from outer space moving at 17,000 miles an hour. What's also happening is robots are getting anthropomorphization. They're getting more and more humanoid features. Watch that robot open the door, they're also going to be designed with haptics and intuition. So when this robot opens the door, he's so kind and he holds it open for his other robot friend. And this is all being programmed with artificial intelligence. So today we're already seeing integration of robots in the operating room. Dr. McCann talked about this. And they're going to become more and more active as time goes by. The middle video is, like our cardiologist friend knows, when people do angiograms, there's a tactile field that requires putting a catheter inside a blood vessel. This video is showing how a robotic arm can actually navigate catheters through blood vessels with less chance of vessel injury and vessel wall dissection. The robot on the bottom is an ultrasound that can be brought into the operating room. So even while you're drilling, imagine that the drill will stop because it gets feedback before it hits the brain or the dura. So these things aren't too hard to imagine. So there's a tremendous amount of system engineering that will happen because once robots get into the healthcare system at a cost affordable price, then what's going to happen is there's going to allow efficiency and scale. Same thing that happened in the manufacturing industry that allows cost to fall down. Of course, in the beginning, there's a quite increase in cost. So the third component of this entire equation is the computer technology and what's been happening around us. And as a neurosurgeon, and I'm sure as many of you, the question I ask is, are they smarter than us? Are we smarter than them? What's the reality? So I want to frame that conversation for a second. The term byte refers to storage or memory capacity, and the term flop refers to the speed of processing, floating operations per second. And I want to bring attention to you. I think today everybody's familiar with terabyte terms, which is more than gigabyte. But I think I want to point out that also start getting familiar with petabyte, which is 1,000 terabytes, and exabytes, which are 1,000 petabytes, okay? So those are orders that you're going to be talking about within the next 5 years, because that's what happens in computer technology. So how many people here know how big a transistor is? Transistors today are manufactured at below 100 nanometers, 1/1000th of an inch. So is that bigger or smaller than a neuron today? It's actually smaller. Neurons are between 60 to 100 micrometers. They're almost 1,000 times bigger. And that's what technology has done, and that's why everybody's scared, right? We can manufacture things that are smaller than neurons with precision. So what is the storage capacity of the human brain? We estimate by size, volume, and weight that there's about 100 billion neurons inside the brain, and each neuron can have anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 connections. With that type of math, we're estimating that there's about a 2.5 petabyte storage capacity in the human brain. Now, that seems like a lot. It gives enough for us to live quite full lives and be creative and do other things. But just to give you some perspective, the Hubble telescope, which is taking pictures of the entire boundary of space, is generating about 10 terabytes of data every year. It's taking about 4,000 pictures a day and sending them back to the Earth. A movie like Avatar took about 1 petabyte of storage. So we're already using that type of capacity on a regular basis, and we have racks of computers that can manage that type of storage. So even on a storage front, we're approaching that of a human brain. So then it becomes our processing power. Are we fast enough? Are we faster than computers? Now, just to put into perspective, an action potential takes about 1,000 hertz. It takes about a millisecond. 1 to 2 milliseconds is the time difference, latency in an action potential. But even then, people estimate that our computing power is on the level of an exaflop. So our computing power is on a peta, is 1,000 times higher than a petaflop level. And why that is at any 1 second, you are actually filtering vision, sound, smell, touch, intuition, hormones. All these things are being integrated by the brain, and you're filtering out the noise and trying to come up with real conclusions. Today's supercomputers are being clocked at 200 petaflops. So perhaps not as fast as the human brain, but it's estimated that we're going to get to the exascale by 2020. Next year, we're going to see a supercomputer hit exaflop computing. So we are in trouble. Electronics are surpassing what the human mind can do, with one tiny exception. And the only tiny exception is that we can do all that work by spending 20 watts of energy a day. and everybody's familiar with the heat energy from a light bulb. These gigantic machines are taking, obviously, planet's resources of fuel to drive them. Now, the processing and artificial intelligence, because we had a lot of discussion on this, is also getting there. The mathematics of the world, there's a renaissance happening in mathematics today, because they can with machine learning, algorithmically, you can figure things out. In 2011, IBM Watson developed a program called Watson, and it beat man in Jeopardy. And Google DeepMind created AlphaGo. It's a wonderful documentary on Netflix on that, which can actually beat people at the game of Go or chess. So it's happening because of all the electronic workup. So how does this all relate to neurosurgery? You saw Dr. McCann elegantly show us this entire study about stereo EEG and what's happening, and I want to frame the technology and show you how that is exactly what is happening in neurosurgery. So epilepsy surgery, you heard, is this team-based approach, and we also perform epilepsy surgery at our hospital, and we had an opportunity to be part of a tremendous research work group. So when the patients had their stereo EEG electrodes placed inside their brain, while we were waiting for their seizures so we can understand diagnostically how to treat them, we would have them memorize words on a computer screen. So you can see lists of words, 12 words. Then we would distract them with math problems, and then we would try to see how many words they can recall and which words they would forget, right? And it allowed us, while we were waiting for seizures to occur, it gave us this platform to understand the mind and a platform to understand memory. And so we worked with a grant with 8 other centers. Columbia Medical Center was part of that group. And we were able to take data and accumulate data on 360 people in 3.5 to 4 years. We actually had collectively data from 45,000 electrodes inside the brain from these 8 academic centers, and we also stimulated them, and we created these type of maps. So the green bar is what's happening on the computer screen when a word is being shown to the patient, on and off, and the bar and on the bottom is the electrical signals, high frequency activities inside the human brain. So when the patient sees this, they get massive signals in the occipital lobe, which is charged with vision. And then as the patient is trying to recall the word, and they are in encoding phase of memory, it goes towards the hippocampus. And as they're consolidating that memory, you're going to see activations of Wernicke's and Broca's areas. So we can create a real-time map now of human thought. Calculations like this, we could do 5, 10, 15 years ago. We just started most of these projects within the last decade. And it took us days to do this kind of calculation, and now it's taking us hours because it's cloud-based computing, and we're all sharing data. To give you a sense for even the type of surgery that Dr. McCann actually showed, when we're doing stereo EEG, we get these MRIs, and we get angiograms, and we can see every blood vessel in the brain. And why he said that those surgery takes an incredible amount of time and planning, because the computer programs now can actually segment out the brain tissue and segment out the blood vessels, and you saw pictures of that. And we can plan on each individual image. And this is why we need computer augmentation to do it, because it's so labor intensive. So we can plan how to get those wires inside the brain without obviously nicking a single blood vessel. So it's really threading a needle. And just to give you a sense for what that looks like when all these needles are there, you can thread all those needles safely through the brain now with the augmentation of all this data processing, robot tools to hold your trajectories, and the imaging type of work that exists with MRIs, CAT scans, and the technology that it's gone through. So although the picture is frightening, we can put an electrode almost anywhere inside the brain safely. So it is the platform for studying the mind. It is the platform for studying memory. With the memory experiments that our 8 centers have done, we can predict with about 85% accuracy, if you see a word on the screen, what is the probability that you're going to recall it or not. Now, I'm going to talk about 2 other things because I talked about mapping the mind. In epilepsy, it's also really important to understand consciousness. Epilepsy becomes a problem not only when the fit starts, but when the person passes out or has a grand mal seizure. So these are real problems that occur and are actually being solved. And I'd like to give the audience this gentleman, Max Tegmark. and watch his TED Talk, because he talks about mathematical modeling of consciousness, which is happening at this time as we speak. And what's interesting is my Mac is running out of power. But anyway, we're also mapping out human emotions the same way, and Dr. Mayberg is going to talk about all the studies in depression. But each one of these components, by studying the electrophysiology and the functional MRI technology that exists today, we're able to decipher how all these little components come together and make up human mind and thought. So hopefully that gives you a picture of the space mission and how all the technology that all our governments worked on over the last 5 to 6 decades, and how that's translating into realizable advancements about the neuroscience platform and the neurosurgery and neurology platforms. So in the last few minutes, I'm going to just give you a couple of thoughts for what's our missions for tomorrow. Our missions for tomorrow is about leadership among physicians. It's about transforming patients' lives and focusing on empathy for our patients, and it's talking about developing further tools which has to be innovated from the physicians. So the first point about the physicians and the message I want to leave is this point about, and I'm going to read you the quote from Dr. Seuss, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not." So as doctors and patients, we got to ask ourselves what exactly we need to treat, what ailment there is that has to be made better, and how we can work towards it. This is not an environment where you can just let the administrators, government, people who focus on other issues, such as money, drive what the business should be. Both patients and doctors have to be entrepreneurial, because it has to be both cost-effective and deliver high quality and value to exist in this medical environment, especially in an environment like in India, where you need to treat 1.4 billion people. And it's only with doctors becoming better leaders. The doctors are the only voice that patients have in the system. Insurance companies don't know the patient, governments don't know the patient, the scientists don't know the patient. The only person who knows the patients are physicians. Now, physicians, just to put it into perspective, aren't born leaders. I went to med school and studied for 10,000 hours. Then I went to residency, and I spent another 20,000 hours of my life training to become a physician, as other physicians in this audience have done. So when do you become and pick up these leadership skills on how to work with teams, communicate, create business plans, and work on these innovations? It's not a core trait that is actually brought into healthcare. And so in this era of consumerism, advancing technology, big business interests, you need more physician leaders. I also purport that you need partners. I was lucky to be married to Kanupriya. I'm married now 23 years, had an arranged marriage here in India, in New Delhi. You need people, and my marriage has worked out for a simple reason. I got married to someone who had the same thoughts, same background, same principles, and same dreams. We need to be around people like this audience who have those exact same thoughts, same background, same principles, same dreams if we want to affect change. See, healthcare is really complicated. It's a maze. It's a maze for patients. It's a maze for doctors. You don't know what treatment to guess. It only depends on whose door you fall on. And even for a single doctor, it's so hard to keep up with all the technology and information out there, right? It's not humanly possible. At some level, we're going to need artificial intelligence to augment our own knowledge. I'm going to share this quote with you from Maimonides, a Hebrew doctor, and he says, "Save the world, save a life, reduce pain, lift up a community, give hope, inspire young people." It really speaks about the kindness in the world. You know, physicians deal with a lot of emergencies. They wake up in the middle of the night to save lives. They repair broken bodies. They're a safety net for society. But there's always sort of this hidden friction that's also involved in healthcare for us. Having the appreciation of patients is a big thing. So I'm going to share this story with you. That's my junior partner. He's a gentleman that I trained, and he is a vascular neurosurgeon, and he stops bleeding problems in the brain from diseases like AVMs and aneurysms. And so he saved this young lady's life when she was pregnant. And 8 years later, she brought her son back to meet him. And his name is Jefferson. And I work at Thomas Jefferson Hospital. So these type of emotional stories and the other stories that you'll see and come across in your life are so important because it binds the doctor and patient together. It is what doctors do, is take care of patients. And so that general appreciation and coexistence is important. And it's part of the team that has to be assembled to affect change. Now, a couple of the things just to keep you imagining forward is there's a lot of technology on the route. They're going to put active electronics inside stents that can record EEGs. We're able to deliver catheters in the brain to shrink tumors, to deliver chemotherapies for kids with brain tumors in the brainstem. We're able to put, through vagus nerve stimulation, you're able to reduce inflammation in the body, and is being studied now after doing pilots on 24 patients for rheumatoid arthritis. So it's the brain's control of the inflammatory system. By stimulating little other nodes in the body, you can affect flow of blood in the brain for stroke, and you can even open up the brain-blood barrier by stimulating a part of the brain called the sphenopalatine ganglion. Now, a lot of this technology seems out of reach, but I want to share with you the story of Shruti, which is occurring in India. And this is something that really came to my heart. So this was actually started and sponsored by a company called Medtronic. And what they did is they created an otoscope that can take pictures of the ear, of the eardrum, and it can actually send those pictures to a central doctor, an ENT surgeon, who's just looking at the tympanic membranes a day, and it can give an audiogram to these little kids. So kids who have recurrent ear infections and are getting hearing loss can be screened at mere rupees with a technician, just serving as that conduit of that information from one doctor to hundreds and thousands of kids. With this Shruti program, they have screened for under 25 rupees a kid, 250,000 children in this country already. Now you have a database of 250,000 tympanic membranes, and you can create a computer algorithm to augment the doctor's ability to make those diagnoses. So there was a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence and how that happens. It can only happen when you have a lot of data. So you can teach these computer algorithms on how to make diagnosis. But programs like this are going to develop in India, and then basically, I don't know if there's a convenience store in the US called CVS. This will actually be one day in CVS in America, and people will walk into a store and they'll put their baby's ear against this and get a free checkup on an ear exam in the middle of the night when somebody's child can't sleep. And it will come in America for a sizable profit, because if it can happen here for 25 rupees, they can sell it there for $25. And that's like a 70x return on money for these companies. So this is how I think technology is going to develop in the future. So I want to share with you this last image, and this is when the Mars rover just landed on Mars in 2012. And the mission was from the Jet Propulsion Lab. And I never understood exactly what this meant until most recently, as I became philosophical and I'm getting older. So the United States, we were able to hurl that SUV-type vehicle 275 million miles away into space and landed onto Mars. And it only cost $2.5 billion. And I say only because for a 10-year mission, that's only $1 per citizen in the United States per year. So for $10 each, with the whole humanity working together, they're able to get the rover to Mars. Now watch what happens in a few seconds when the rover actually lands. Right, the rover detaches from its pod, and for a little while, the signal takes time to come back from Mars too, right? It's pretty far. Nobody knows what's happening. Nobody knows if it's successful. And everybody screams. Everybody screams in joy. It's the same thing that happens when people win a cricket match. It's the same thing that happens when people win a football match. It's the same joy and jubilation that happens when a group of people are able to achieve the impossible. See, the space mission was about the impossible becoming the possible. It's about groups of people working together for a same cause, having some leadership, some empathy, some directed goals, and taking technology and changing the future. So really back to the beginning, what is Mission Neurosurgery? So Mission Neurosurgery is not about stopping at the moon or landing on Mars. It's about unlocking the secrets of the brain for a better future for health and humanity. So like JFK started in 1962, he thought, many people thought that getting to the moon would be impossible, but the astronauts proved them wrong. So I think it's up to us as neurosurgeons, neurologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists to also do what people think is impossible. I submit that we are the astronauts of this nervous system. Thank you very much.
So Ashwin, you stimulated all of us. What a lot of questions, I hope. Let's see how the talk is open for questions, discussion. Yeah, there.
Thank you for such an inspiring talk. Being a neurosurgeon as well, my question is the future about miniaturizing, artificial intelligence, robotics, or is it about genetic modification or modulation and reversing the disease from not happening itself, or rewinding the disease process?
Yeah.
What do you think is the real
Yeah, so
future?
I think it's a great question, and I'll explain it to you in a very simple manner. The immediate future is more about miniaturization and technology. And if you look at how it's happening, it didn't just happen today, right? It didn't happen last decade. It's really a series of work that's happened since the 1960s, right? In terms of technology, robotic technology, I'm saying, came from space. Visualization technology came from space. Even computer technology came from space. It took us a long time to perfect it, to get here. Now, the biological technologies will also come, but we're not as advanced. So imagine that they are where we were in the space, in the space age. You remember what your TV looked like in 1970. So I bet you the way we use those tools aren't as developed, and so we've got to be 20 to 30 years even off on true biological manipulation inside the brain, specifically for the brain. The cost of deep brain stimulation is coming down now in the US. Today, four and maybe 5 companies are going to start making them. And so there's a very interesting phenomena that happens in healthcare, because unless you have enough competition, there's no driving force to come down. The cost of surgery itself has remained static because of the hospital's baseline overhead expense there is. Now, in India, you're about to see a drop coming down in deep brain stimulation costs, because there's also a Chinese manufacturer called PINS, and they're actually also undercutting the market. So you're almost at that inflection point, but not quite yet.
I am Dr. Chokkalingam. I really appreciate. And you told me how you got your wife with the equal vibrations. But I am very confident. There is no two couples in the earth. They are 100% equal in synchronicity. It is going to be like that. They will never live together. Even with your wife, there must be some difference of opinion that is binding you with your wife. 2, out of 100 billion cells, we generally, as a cardiologist, a neurologist, whatever it may be, you are using as of now only 7% of 100 billion cells. By chance, if you use another 2 or 3, you may get even Nobel Prize. Another 1 or 2%, you may become Buddha or Jesus, whatever. So such an amount of reserve of neurons, and how we can put the use of the other one not used, is there anything that is possible?
Yeah, so the first question is a little bit easier regarding the spouse. I think it's always good to have differing opinions, otherwise, I think even diversity as a small thing is probably good to allow change to happen. And so as a good husband, I do what I'm told. So I'm not sure even if I'm allowed to have a differing opinion on this subject. Regarding the use of the brain, it's very interesting, right? We don't know if the capacity of the human brain has increased or decreased over time. There's no way to have estimated that. But there's a lot of studies to say that we've actually changed the way our brains are working today, right? You're using your memory capacity on your cell phone to memorize numbers where you didn't 20, 30 years ago, right? You actually used your brain. And I'll tell you, 3,000 years ago, when the Gita was written or before the Ramayana was written by Tulsidas, it was all sung, right? So it was all memorized. And who can do that in this room, right? I mean, I don't know if anybody probably can anymore, right? So I bet you we're not even trying to use the capacity of the human brain. So it's all effort dependent. It's like an exercise, right? The more you study, the smarter you become. So I don't think it's so complicated, right? So I just don't think we push ourselves to prioritize. You're too busy working. We're also too busy not even having time to exercise, right? And so we don't take care of our mind the way it probably should be. Yeah, neuroplasticity is a great term. I think it's a better term for the scientists than the neurosurgeons, right? The neuroplasticity is this idea that the brain can adapt, right? There's if you think of the neuron as three components: a dendrite, the receiver, the axon, the body. I mean the body, and then an axon, the effective arm. It's known that a neuron can actually branch more dendrites over time. So the more you use it, the more connections you make. Right? And I think that's familiar, right? Every time we're talking, we're creating connections.
Doctor, I think I'm going to bring this to an end because we have another program beginning about 4:15. So Dr. Sharan, I want to thank you very much for that
Thank you.
very stimulating presentation. And we also have some presentations to make. And Dr. Krishnamurthy, is there anything else you would like to add?
I'll just announce the presentations. Okay. I think we're looking for Blair, who stepped out. I'm sure you'll all agree with me that it was a most enlightening symposium, and the next lecture that follows, the T.S. Srinivasan oration, I'm sure you'll find it as enlightening, if not more. How deep brain stimulation and neurostimulation is making a difference to the treatment of depression and our understanding of it by Professor Mayberg. It's my pleasant duty to present a small token of appreciation to the speakers and chairpersons. So I'm going to request the chairpersons to kindly present a small token. Professor Guy McCann, request you to come up. Professor Ashwini Sharan. My pleasant duty to present it to the chairpersons. Professor Helen Mayberg first. We need to only do similar.
Oh, for heaven's sake, they're sitting there. They're sitting there.
Professor Timothy Pedley. I think we're still missing Professor Ford, but Professor Gangadhar. hoping to get Professor Ford on stage, but can I get everyone to just come up for a group photograph quickly?
Thank you for just making it colorful. We're only hosts.
Thank you. So please do pick up some coffee and join us for the oration on the other side. It's in Rajendra 1 and 2. Please give them a big hand before you leave.